Welcome first-time listeners and returners to the Sports Deli, where everyone deserves a seat at the table. What about fucking Colin? Why does he not have a fucking job? Because he's still being whiteballed. Why is Tom not speaking out about that? He should be his biggest fucking ally. And he hasn't said one fucking thing. A lot of people that have come on this show, I don't know why, they've gotten some good fucking jobs afterwards. Jim Rome in the jungle. It's right here in the Sports Deli, baby. We got some good ass karma right here. Let's fucking go.
I love it.
Man.
I love it.
We hope you enjoy today's show, everyone. All right, let's rock and roll. So today's podcast is brought to you by my Amazon shop. Check it out at amazon.com/shop/the Sports Deli. And you can see all the products that I've done videos on, my idea list, and my shoppable photos. I may make a commission on any of the things that you watch or see, but it's at no extra cost to you. Enjoy today's show. Do we have to refer to him as Mr. Duncan? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, please, I'm very formal, Secretary Duncan.
There you go. Exactly.
Just put a sir on the end of it. Secretary Duncan, sir.
Well, because, Jay Billis always said that he could never call Coach K Mike, even after all these years, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Mike's a different level. I'm not. So it's all good.
All right, here we go. We're so honored to welcome on this 28th day of National Fresh Celery Month and 4 days away from Mental Health Awareness Month to welcome the pride of the Windy City, the Bears, MJ, the Blackhawks, and stay tuned to today's rapid fire to find out if he's a White Sox or Cubs fan, the real and the original AD, Arne Duncan, former Secretary of Education of the United States under President Barack Obama. Arne was born the same day as Pat Tillman and, believe it or not, James Naismith. And the same year as Del Curry, Steph's dad, Brett Hull, sorry Blackhawks fans, Cheryl Miller, who's been on the show 4 times, and Dan Brown, author of the Da Vinci Code. I threw that in there because Arne's such an avid reader, although I don't know if he actually likes mystery thrillers, Kamala Harris, and Michelle Obama, who I wish would run for president of the United States one day, but everybody I ask says there's no way. Arne, shout out to Dan, my co-host today. Dan was on the show also, and you've known him for a long time. Truly honored and humbled that you're joining us today in the Sports Deli podcast, where everyone deserves a seat at the table, especially a former Secretary of Education. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, you guys have known each other for a long time, and we had a pre-podcast conversation earlier, and you shared some things with me that really hit me here. And you guys have been around professional athletes, one of the most incredible presidents ever in the history of the United States. But let's take it back a little bit to when you guys first met, and Dan, what has impressed you the most, about Arne now that you look back on it and have had time to reflect, from the time you met until now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for having me as a co-host. Super nice of you to ask. And how you doing, Arne? We got to see each other a couple of weeks ago at a mutual friend's party and birthday party in Chicago, so we got to catch up a little bit. So glad you're doing okay. I think it's one of those I knew you when kind of things, right? Just 2 guys playing basketball and having mutual friends in Hyde Park and University of Chicago, and just kind of battling, and then we ended up started playing in 3-on-3 tournaments together, and Chicago Park District, men's leagues together. So a long history of basketball. And Arne, as everyone knows, is a great basketball player and really fun teammate to have. One of those guys that makes you better on the court. So always love playing with him. But I guess if you ask me what what I admire or like what I think about, it's just kind of following his career and seeing him at the start. I think when we first met, it was working with I Have a Dream Foundation in a middle school class, and just working with all those kids to first get them to high school and get them through high school, and then helping them with college, and just kind of following that path, and then seeing that lead to superintendent of schools in Chicago, which is a massive job, and then of course the Secretary of Education. And I think the thing that always had me like wanting to do anything I could to help him or support him, it's just that in some crazy political climates of like Chicago, and then of course American politics, somehow you've always been able to just keep your decision making to what's best for the kids. You know, like I've never seen you in a situation where it's like, oh, well, Chicago, I've got to do this or say that, or my constituency, or, you know, Democrats, Republicans. It's like somehow you've been able to navigate that mess and just like, this is best for students and this is what we're going to do. So, you know, I do really admire you for that. And you've done, you know, one hell of a job through your career. And now what you're doing now is so impressive with, you know, just trying to get some stability to Chicago. So my hat's off to you on and off the basketball court.
No, it's been a great partnership, and Mike, as you know, Dan's an unbelievable competitor, and you know, no one plays harder, no one's in better shape than Dan. So having him as a teammate, and it's funny, he's just one of those guys. He's helped out from day one. So whether it was do a little 3-on-3 fundraiser, and for our work back at Area with I Have a Dream, and Dan was an upper deck then, and coming up with all kinds of goodies that we could give away, and not give away, auction off to folks to give us prizes. But it's just been Dan's one of those giving guys, and so it's been just a whole lot of fun to have friends like that for how long is it now? I don't know, 30 years, 20 years, a long time.
I was looking, I think we're going on 40, dude.
Yeah, that's scary. Don't say that.
I know, right? Hey, cut that out of this.
We all got a little gray going on there.
Yeah.
Let me dig a little bit deeper though, because I know for me a light went on after George Floyd. And I was like, I cannot speak about stuff that's irrelevant an hour and a half later anymore. Not in this space. And I saw Rodney King, and there was things, you know, growing up that I witnessed that were uncomfortable. And we knew about people speaking out, mostly in the Black and brown community, but not in the spaces of white allyship. But you, because of your parents' upbringing, and your mom in particular, I think that light went on a lot earlier for you. And so I think it's important that we three, who you're a major influencer, I'm a micro influencer along with Dan, that we understand how important it is in this space to be an ally. But I'm so curious, I know you've talked about this before, as to even looking back on it now, like, did you even realize how impactful your parents were, especially your mom, in your journey?
Yeah, it's a really thoughtful question. Just to give folks listening a little background. So we grew up in Hyde Park, literally on the campus of the University of Chicago. My dad was a professor there. I lived 2 blocks from where I grew up. It was really important for me to come back home. And so that was sort of half my life. The other half of my life is my mother ran an after school tutoring program. And what was sort of crazy, it was literally like 12 blocks from our house. Like we used to walk there some days, but it was across at that point the invisible barrier of 47th Street between sort of middle class integrated Hyde Park and all Black, all poor North Kentwood, Oakland. And she took us there from the time we were 2 weeks old. So raised my sister and brother and I as a part of it. And as a kid, you don't know any better. It's just your life. You don't know how to compare, and you don't realize until much older sort of how unique that is. But just living in those 2 different worlds and seeing the differences between the opportunities that my friends had at Hyde Park and the lab schools where I went, and the opportunities that my friends in the after school, my mother's program had. And just people talk about different zip codes. It was actually the same zip code. It wasn't even a different zip code, but just radically different worlds. And I think that unfairness, that inequality has been the driver for my sister, brother, and I all tried to follow in her footsteps. She did that work for, I think, 52 years until her health gave out. Unfortunately, she has Alzheimer's, but she was the most courageous, a million crazy stories, the most courageous person I knew. And people would threaten her and threaten us, and we just show up for work the next day, and taking your 3 babies into that community and ultimately really being embraced by the community. It was to say it was formative is an understatement. And everything I've tried to do is honestly just tried to build upon the work I saw and the opportunity I saw and the unmet needs that we grew up with.
And Dan, you can jump in anytime, but in the interest of time, I probably would normally elaborate on that, but that's sort of got to let it breathe for a second, don't you, Dan? Like, just to think about that whole, like, you don't know any better.
Yeah, I think the invisible barrier that you talked about at 47th Street, I was further south, and for me, it was Western Avenue. And that's just Chicago, right or wrong, or it's just how it was. And I know that seems lame saying just how it was, but that was how it was. So not many people went across that invisible barrier, right? So your mom just going like, well, I'm not going to recognize the barrier. We're going to go and try to, break down that barrier and just pretend it doesn't exist and make this happen and make things better was, just really courageous to be able to do that. And your mom, I never played against your mom, but a lot of the guys at UFC was like, oh yeah, she'd be out there balling with us in pickup games. So your mom's got a reputation on the court too.
Yeah. She played for a lot of years, and that was her. that was her recruitment. She would recruit folks off the court to come be volunteer tutors in her program. So that was her HR function. And I didn't. President Obama came in once and said, your mother, she fouled a lot. She hacked a lot. I'm like, I'm really sorry. I don't know what to say. She did hack a lot. I agree. But yeah, lots of stories. Lots of stories.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that's amazing. The other thing that you've talked about in the past is that those experiences allowed you to read people from different perspectives, different walks of life, and you had a different level of sensitivity, and a level of empathy that you just can't teach. You can't read it in a textbook. You can't learn it at Harvard, or Princeton. I know your son's going to go to Princeton. I don't know how you feel about that. We can ask about that later. But, in all seriousness, talk about not only looking back again on how important it was to learn how to read people and empathy and being the type of nurturing person that you are, and then how that led into the academic space, that you later pursued.
Yeah, well, I've been really, really lucky to go to some amazing, schools and college. But I always say that, maybe true for all of us, that for me, basketball has always been by far my best classroom. I mean, nothing comes close.
Yeah.
And all the life lessons of, that are cliches, but are just so real of, working hard and overcoming failure and handling pressure and how to be a good teammate and how to be resilient and how to persevere. Like I said, I don't know how you teach that in algebra or biology, but you just sort of gain that every single day, growing up. And I was always, I grew a foot in high school, so I was 5'2" as a freshman in high school. So
Wow.
I was the ultimate late developer, and Dan knows that I'm slower than ever, but I've always been slow. So you're slow, you're small. You got to try and figure out somehow to win. And if there are 20 guys waiting to play next, if you love to play on the court, you have to win. So just trying to figure out how to be a good teammate and how to win. There's no better place to do that. And all those lessons transfer from the court to life, to everything we do. And whatever leadership, responsibility I've had, I go back to that. That was like the ultimate training ground. But then I grew up, first playing in my mother's center, but then playing out in the streets on the south and west side. Started doing that when I was 13, 14. And, that was definitely a little unusual, and just honestly, just trying to frankly live and how to navigate. And there are people who I literally trusted with my life who I just only knew their nickname. I just knew their street name. I didn't know their government name, and who to stay away from, when to get out of a situation. That was I got pretty good at reading character because I had to do that to be safe. And it was important to me to be in those neighborhoods because that's where the good basketball was. So if you were serious about playing, you had to go where the talent was, and that's where the talent was in Chicago. And so that subtle stuff of being able to try and figure people out pretty quickly, and figure out do they have your best interests at heart or no, and how to handle those situations. Again, just an ultimate training ground was just the playgrounds in Chicago.
And if you didn't win, you had to wait 2 hours.
Yeah, that was not if you loved to play, you just sort of couldn't lose. And so
Right.
Yeah, you didn't. No one wanted to sit there for 2 hours. So yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, I don't want to gloss over Harvard because I'm sure you learned a lot there. If you want to tie it in somehow, definitely do that, because I think the white privilege piece and how we all three of us navigate that and leverage that in order to help people put better tools in their toolboxes, and for not only us, but for others to be a better version of themselves every day and to be an ally. But, President Obama took a non-traditional path to the presidency, and you took a non-traditional path to be the Secretary of Education, never having taught a class. And so I'm just curious, not necessarily regarding the pushback, but leading up to that point, you know, did President Obama know some of these things about you? Obviously you're vetted in a whole different kind of way at that level, but you know, were you planning on trying to go down that path, to leverage what I just talked about, that platform and your white privilege?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it's part of why I do what I do now, because it was weird. I got the best of both worlds. I got the best of the Hyde Park and the intellectual bit of the university and being in that community. But then I also got the best of the inner city world of the toughness and the resiliency, and I know I got the best of both, and most people only get one or the other. And those two things made me, but when that makes you, you sort of can't forget where you come from, and that's why it's important to come back. But one of the things that ties us three together is basketball, and it's actually, I'll just give you a little background. So Michelle Obama, the president, obviously President Obama's wife, her older brother Craig Robinson was a great player. So we grew up playing together, both on the South Side. And so played it in forever summer leagues. And so our first sense of Barack Obama was that was Craig's little sister's boyfriend. I mean, that's how we knew him. And, had to sort of figure him out. We actually figured him out in the court a little bit. Was he okay for Michelle? And we decided that he was. But he was in the, in the Illinois legislature and then a senator. And I remember going home one night and telling my wife, Karen, that, I think Barack's going to run for president. And she literally said, president of what? She thought it was like the condo association or something.
Oh my God.
They used to do the groceries together on the weekend. I said, no, these are run for president of the United States. And she's like, Brock, no, it's never happened. And the rest is history. But beyond the basketball tie, we spent a lot of time talking education policy. He visited schools with me, in CPS, all the time. And so he had a real sense for what I stood for and what I was about. And I knew where he came from. And, Michelle and Craig came from a great family, but neither one of their parents was college educated. They're both first gen. And, Brock had his very, very real challenges growing up. Hawaii was a very forgiving environment. Had he grown up in the South Side of Chicago, I promise you he would not have been president. It's too tough an environment, given all of his challenges. And so I knew how important education was to both of them personally, not just intellectually, but viscerally. And this sounds a little crazy, but I just mean it. I had no ambition to go to DC. My goal was to be CEO of Chicago Public Schools for 10 years. I had done 7.5. There's so much turnover in these jobs. I really wanted to have stability. But just, how many times does your friend become president? It's sort of, crazy, obviously. And I just knew his heart and his character. So I really didn't go for it. If he had said, come to the White House and take out the garbage from me, I would have, said, I'm in. And so it was nothing about the job or the title. It was just being part of a historic administration, someone who I knew had a heart for the kids that I cared about and had a heart for the communities I cared about. And just to be, we all try and be good teammates. I just wanted to be the best teammate I could. So that was literally, that was literally the only job in the world that I would have left Chicago for, was to be a part of his team.
Yeah, that's incredible. And, you're not a politician, but you were in a political space. President Obama obviously was a politician and a great orator, and just, a brilliant person who also looked at education maybe differently than some of our other presidents. And so, he got Obamacare passed, which was no easy task. And I'm curious, because I want to lead this into where we are now after the pandemic educationally, because disproportionately it's already, something that we should be concerned about, but then the pandemic set us back even more. So I want to ask you about that after. But what things while you were Secretary of Education were you most proud of that you brought both sides of the aisle together to do?
Well, Dan mentioned this at the top, and I happen to be a Democrat, but for me, education has to be the ultimate nonpartisan and bipartisan issue. Mm-hmm. Like I say, a good military is our best defense, but a great education system is our best offense as a nation. Mm-hmm. And for me, there's nothing left or right or liberal, conservative about any of this. So I can go through successes, I can go through failures as well, but a couple places where, really proud of what we did. And honestly, I was pretty skeptical of the federal role in education. That's why I said it was no ambition of mine to go be Secretary of Education. But we put hundreds of millions of dollars into early childhood, high quality early childhood education. And I think that's the best investment we can make. And again, all these lessons really just go back to growing up a part of my mother's program. And she always said, the earlier she gets kids, the better they did. And we would see a family of 5 would come into our program. And I'd watch how the 13, 14-year-olds would do okay, but have some challenges. But the 3 and 4-year-olds would just skyrocket because you get a chance to impact their lives for a much longer time and starting earlier. So we put a huge amount of resources into that in a space where historically our department didn't play much. So that was really important. We got high school graduation rates up to all-time highs for every segment: white, Black, Latino, rich, poor, English language learners, special needs, didn't matter. Kids below the poverty line. So, and again, those, for me, none of these things like mission accomplished. It's always still so far to go, but really, pushing very, very hard there. And then in higher education, 2 things. One, dramatically increasing access to Pell Grants without going back to taxpayers for nickel. We sort of cut out the middleman there and had more than a million more students of color go on to college and use those grants. And that felt fantastic. And we put a big emphasis on community colleges. I know both you guys have real lived experience there. And for me, those are like the unpolished gems, unrecognized gems among the education continuum, and really trying to shine a spotlight and put lots of resources behind that. And the best of community colleges are like regional economic engines. They drive the economy and drive employment and create opportunity in those communities. So I always look sort of, cradle to career. So early childhood, expanding access, K-12, highest graduation rates at that point ever. Then higher ed, expanding opportunity, both for Pell Grants for students who need access there, and then really trying to put a lot more resources behind community colleges.
So, I'm in the middle school space right now because of, my daughter, and I see a lot of, disparities because of the pandemic. And so I just want to ask a broad question about, and you tie it in any way you want, but what's the most important thing now as far as education goes? Because we're seeing lower numbers, not only at the community college level that you mentioned, but more people being entrepreneurs and less emphasis on actual history. Sorry, I had to throw it in there. And education as a whole. And so how do we not only continue to bridge the gap between disproportionate communities and make education, a priority so that, we're on a more equal playing field?
So obviously the COVID and the pandemic was just absolutely devastating. And I was just trying to be honest, it was horrific, but had we had better leadership in DC, we would have saved, hundreds of thousands of lives and had less, detrimental impact on our kids, on our schools, on our economy. So the man-made piece of this disaster is just something that we can never sort of lose sight of or forget. And sure, you guys lost friends, I lost friends, and it just it did not have to be as horrific as it was. And that is just a devastating piece of the story of this chapter. Coming out of it, we know this, always the kids and communities who are the furthest behind are always hit the hardest. And so the disproportionate impact of basically 2 years off of school is beyond devastating. And so, we already had a big, I don't call them achievement gaps, I call them opportunity gaps. We already had a massive opportunity gap, and that was just exacerbated. So the fact that so many kids are so far behind academically is devastating. And so for me, there are 2 things. One is doing whatever we can to accelerate learning and help kids catch up. And for me, it's got to be a sort of a sprint between, we're almost in May now, between now and the start of this next school year, this fall, 3, 4, 5 months, whatever we can do to help kids catch up so they have a chance to be successful academically, we have to do that. And we know that high dosage tutoring is the best way to do that. We can do that physically, we can do it virtually, we can do it blended, but getting kids the resources they need, that's half of it. The second half is just the social and emotional support that the kids and teachers, adults need. And the amount of trauma, the amount of loss, the amount of fear, it was extraordinary. And so for me, those are always 2 sides of the same coin. I'm always going to be the guy pushing for high standards and more kids going to college and more AP classes. But if folks are living with trauma, they're living with fear, if they're being bullied, if they don't have access to food, if they're need eyeglasses, if they need dental exams, we have to take care of all of that. And so that for me is the foundation upon which high academic standards are built. So meeting kids and adults where they are, giving them the support, the counseling, whatever they need to work through the real trauma of that time and ongoing trauma so that we can have the highest of academic standards. Those are the two things that I would just be absolutely laser focused on for, yes, the next 3, 4, 5 months, but for the next couple years as well.
Well, Dan, that's some of the sort of nuances that we were talking about, about how he has a different level of reading people and understanding some of the things that other people, either politicians or not, that, they just don't understand. Does social media or AI factor into bridging this gap?
Social media is complicated. In my current work now, really trying to reduce violence in the city, social media is a real driver of the violence, and we can get into that if you want to. So very more than mixed on it, but it's something that's not going away. But yes, social media, can be a force for good. Technology can be a force for good. AI can be a force for good. And so how we harness technology, for me, the goal is never technology for technology's sake. The goal is to harness technology to reach kids where they are. And that can be inner city Chicago, that can be on a Native American reservation, that can be in remote Wyoming. And the idea of kids being able to learn anything they want, anytime, anywhere, 24/7, or have access to the mental health services they need anytime, anywhere. Technology can absolutely help to bridge those divides.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, anything that you're thinking
No,
about?
I would like to get into just, can you tell us what you're doing now? Because
Right.
it's really fascinating to, leave that giant scale and get back boots on the ground and just one-on-one in in a lot of situations. And how was that transition? And tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, give a little backstory. This is a more sobering conversation, but go back to where we started, sort of as a teenager playing ball in different neighborhoods, and I had a set of older guys who were mentors, big brothers, who honestly sort of protected me and gave me safe passage in and out of neighborhoods. And a couple of them were killed, lost their lives due to gun violence. And for me as a 15, 16, 17, at that point, I didn't have a counselor, social worker. You just sort of internalize that stuff. And I think it sort of shapes you and honestly probably scars you in some ways, a little bit difficult to talk about. Fast forward to my 20 years to when I led the Chicago Public Schools, and lots I'm proud of, and happy to talk about that in another podcast if you want. But on my watch, in my 7.5 years, on average, we lost a child, a student, to gun violence every 2 weeks. It was a staggering rate of loss. And thank goodness never in a school, but on the way home on the bus, at the corner store, shot through the living room window at 7:30 on a Wednesday morning, getting ready to go to school. And my wife and I had 2 young kids then, and everything that was supposed to be hard about my job, academic achievement, labor management, budgets, operations, you name it. I don't say that stuff was easy, but it was all wildly easier than meeting these families 99% of the time after they had just lost their son or daughter, and going to those homes, going to those funerals, going to those classrooms where there was an empty chair in a class of traumatized kids, and trying to make sense of the senseless. That was by far the hardest thing I did. And it didn't get easier. It got progressively harder, quite honestly. And I don't think, I know we, as whatever we are, adults, parents, educators, leaders, we fail to keep our kids safe on the south and west sides of Chicago. I kept a drawing above my desk at CPS that a young, actually middle school young guy had given me. It's a picture of him climbing up a ladder. And his caption was, "If I grow up, I want to be a fireman." And for me, it was always when I grow up. Probably for you guys is when I grow up. But that is so real that it really is a very honest and open question of if I grow up. And very naively, it shows how not smart I am. When we left to go to DC, our family in 2009, I thought Chicago was at rock bottom. I thought it couldn't get worse in terms of the violence. And then for a whole host of reasons, in 7 years we were gone, it did get worse. And so for me, coming home to a city that had given me every opportunity, educationally, athletically, socially, culturally, this felt like the crisis facing the city, felt like we weren't addressing it head on. And I just felt compelled, frankly, that this is what I wanted to work on. I say we're sort of motivated by our successes, but we're haunted by our failures. And for for me that this has been a failure my entire life in the city. And so started a small nonprofit called Chicago Cred. Cred stands for Creating Real Economic Destiny. We've been at it 6.5 years now, and working with the men and now women, and we're now down to 13-year-olds, unfortunately, working with those most at risk of shooting and being shot, and giving them a reason to put down the guns and do something very different. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's honestly the most heartbreaking, but it's also the most meaningful and the most inspiring. And we've learned a lot in the past 6.5 years. We're going to keep learning, but we've served over 1,000 folks now, and to see that transformation, see the changes, and see the neighborhoods we're working in the South and West Side, getting safer much faster than the rest of the city. I'm really, really hopeful about where we can go over the next couple of years to try and make our city safer and give our kids their childhoods back.
Yeah, Dan, I'm going to piggyback on that. And, you can summarize it. There's been a lot of school shootings. I mean, just shootings in general in grocery stores, but, the ones that garner the most attention, I think a lot of the times is because of the kids. And so what do you tell people who say this is a Second Amendment issue, which I argue that it's not necessarily, because, yeah, we could hire ex-military to, be at all of our schools, but in the end, what's your take on that? Because I think it's an important question.
I got a lot of thoughts there, but we have more guns than human beings, than people in America. So if guns made us safer, we would be the safest nation on the planet. And all this thing about, I spent a lot of time in this issue on the school side. We could talk specifically on that, but we've had plenty of school massacres where there are armed guards, where this just doesn't work. And the talking points, we need to harden schools. And it's just, this is all a ploy just to sell guns. That's all this is. And obviously you can't harden recess. You can't harden dismissal. You can't harden athletic events. You can't harden field trips. You can't harden buses. And so I just think, I hate to say this, but we just love our guns more than we love our kids in this country. And there's a level of carnage that is extraordinary. And I'll be real honest here. What I always thought when, my kids in Chicago, 90% were Black and brown kids. What I really thought is that as long as Black and brown kids were getting killed, nobody really cared. And I thought that it would take white kids being killed for things to happen, for things to change. And then Sandy Hook happened. And that was, not telling any secrets out of school, that was the hardest day of President Obama's presidency. He dealt, by definition, with the hardest issues on the planet. He went down the next day. The vice president and I, at that point, now President Biden and I, went down a couple of days later. That was largely 20 white babies, 5 teachers, and the principal. Went to the funeral of the principal, and stayed in close contact with a couple of those families. And I'll never forget that time, and the fact that we got nothing, zero done in terms of gun legislation subsequent to that is devastating. And so I don't want to say it's weekly, but it's almost, it's just a constant recurring thing. And the news cycles are so fast now. You hear about it for, one day, maybe 2 days, and it's gone. So whether it's Nashville, whether it's whatever, you have your March for Your Lives T-shirt on. I got close to some of those young people from Parkland. We took actually 300 of our guys from Chicago to that original March for Our Lives in DC, because really it's actually incredibly powerful to see our young men from Chicago who've grown up with this issue comforting families from Parkland. And I sent down a set of our young folks to meet with the young people in Parkland. And it was deep. They some of those young people lived in a gated community. And our people didn't know what a gated community was. They thought it was a jail. Like, they just had never seen a gated community. They were trying to figure out where these kids lived. So lots of differences of race and class and socioeconomic status. But I'll never forget, one of our young guys said, our shared pain makes us family. And so for all the differences, what our guys have grown up with in Chicago and what folks in Parkland and other places unfortunately experience, that ties us all together. And I hate that that's the thing that seems to unite us now as Americans, is this loss and this grief and this fear and this heartbreak and trauma. But that seems to be what connects us. And we have to get to a better place. Final thing I'll say is, you can't isolate schools from their communities. And so whether it's schools, whether it's places of worship, whether it's shopping malls, whether it's concerts, whether it's bars, whether it's whatever, there's zero part of our society which is immune from gun violence now. And I don't know what it will take as us as a nation to do what every other, Australia, Japan, Canada, you just go right down the list. This is not rocket science. This is not finding a cure for cancer. It's not putting a man on Mars. We just lack the will to keep our kids and families safe, and it's devastating. It's unimaginable to me.
Yeah, I saw you getting a little bit choked up there, and understandably so. I felt that, and it is a sad narrative that people love their guns more than their kids.
And so to
And I
answer
don't
your
know,
question, just quickly, it's just like if people want to hunt ducks or deer or whatever, I have no problem with
right?
that. When they hunt kids, and that's when I have a problem. And we have these weapons of war, these assault weapons that are disproportionately used in these mass shootings. Those are, again, maybe they have a place in Iraq or Afghanistan or on the battlefields,
Yeah.
but they don't have a place in our streets. And it's just this has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. It has to do with trying to keep people alive and not have our kids growing up thinking that this is just sort of inevitable that's going to happen to them. Again, too many of our kids now think about if, not when. And for your kids, for my kids, Dan's got 2 young daughters, for this to be part of their reality, it is, we're doing them such a disservice. It's just incredible to me that we as adults care so little about their well-being, their mental health, that we allow this to have become normalized.
Yeah, I know when I go into a Walmart or drop my daughter off every day, I'm looking at that side gate a lot differently than I used to. All right, let's get to the rapid fire. This is the fun part of the show, ladies and gentlemen. Dan, if you have any that you want to throw out there, we got about 5 minutes maybe at the most. Squats or lunges, Arnie?
Oh, brother. Need to do more of both. More of both. Don't like either. Need to do both. Yeah.
So you played at Harvard. Your son's going to Princeton. Can you still beat him? Can you beat him, or is he beating you now? Like, does he have some?
That day we crossed the Rubicon a little while ago, so I try to be a pretty good rebounder. That's about it these
There you go.
days.
So if you,
I can
go
still
ahead,
I can still back Orla down.
Dan. That's right. Absolutely. So if you guys were playing in the current era, right? Different game, a lot more creativity, and both of you were working on your step back threes. And Larry Bird used to actually do a step back three, but nobody really talks about that. Who would have the better step back three, Arnie, you or Dan?
I'll give it to Dan.
No,
I never had a step back. It wasn't in my repertoire.
the only reason I can play on any team with Arnie is because I'll guard the point guard. There's no shooting. He's got me shooting wise.
That's hilarious. So you have a favorite book that you're reading now? You're an avid reader.
Yeah, I don't have a favorite book. I should be reading a favorite book now. So I try and stay current on a whole bunch of different, education topics, gun stuff. So more articles than books. And I need to probably find some more time just to read. Yeah.
Not to put you on the spot. Did you read Obama's book?
I have not read Obama's book. Been interviewed for different pieces of stuff, but no, I
Yeah,
haven't.
it was very interesting for sure. Do you have a favorite food?
Pizza.
Wow. Chicago style pizza, I would imagine, not New York style.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Absolutely. Do you have a favorite athlete of all time?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Obviously, you mentioned Bird, MJ, Magic. Those are the three that they're way up there for me. Yeah.
Who do you like watching now?
Love watching Steph. I love watching Ja. Love watching Luca. Those would probably be the guys that I most enjoy watching. Yeah.
You have a pick for the NBA champ this year?
I think it's wide open. It's wide open.
It is.
Denver's interesting to me. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you ever had to switch lives with somebody for a day, who would it be?
Ooh, boy.
Could be past or present, dead or alive.
Yeah. Well, I won't quite answer that. I wouldn't switch, but just the person I've really tried to learn from historically is Martin Luther King. Just had a tremendous influence on me. So trying to study how he lived his life and what he did and why, that's been profoundly impactful on me.
Cubs or White Sox?
I'm a South Side boy like Dan, so yeah.
Got you. Okay, so in 5 years, where do you see yourself? 2 more questions.
I hope 5 years from now we have a 75 to 80% reduction in gun violence here in Chicago, and that's where I'm gonna keep doing this work until we get there.
Amazing. Okay, so if you could have one person at your dinner table, besides Dan and me, past or present, dead or alive, that you've never met before, who would be at your dinner table?
Ooh, man, that's a deep one. Give you 2 different ones. Give you Lincoln and Gandhi.
Wow. Amazing. Well, the floor is yours, Arnie. Any last words before we wrap things up?
No, just
So appreciate being here.
appreciate your work, appreciate your commitment on this stuff, and appreciate Dan Scary. I hope 40-year relationship. God, I hope let's call it 30 years. But
Okay, we'll say 30.
I'm not the no new friends guy, but I'm a big old friends. Or that's my comfort zone. And so just appreciate what you guys are both doing to help others and to be a voice on these issues. And we need it now more than ever. And so just thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, that's awesome. Any one thing that you've never told anyone before publicly that nobody knows about? What's one thing nobody knows about, Arnie?
It's a whole lot, but I'm not gonna start sharing.
All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Former Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan. Can't thank you enough for joining us today here in the Sports Daily. Dan, thanks for co-hosting.
Oh,
Great
thanks for having me.
conversation. Yeah, we'd love to have you back. Maybe talk about some of the other things that you mentioned. Truly an honor, and keep doing the work that you're doing. It's truly inspiring, and it goes often unnoticed. And mad props and flowers to you for your entire journey, your parents, and hopefully your son has a lot of success at Princeton. Looking forward to following his career. That's amazing that he's doing that, and what your daughter's doing too. Not to go unnoticed just because she's not playing intercollegiate sports. She's doing amazing things as well.
She's the brains of the family, so she's going to do more than fine.
Right.
Absolutely. All right, have an amazing weekend, both of you, amazing humans. Much love to you both, and thanks again for honoring this space. And I enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thanks so much
Sounds
for the
good.
opportunity. A lot of fun. You
Yeah,
guys take
bye.
care. Have a great
All
weekend.
right.
See you,
Take care.
Arnie.
You too. Thanks, Arnie.
Bye-bye.
All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Arne Duncan. Thanks, Dieter.
So such an interesting guy. It's always been interesting.
Yeah, that was incredible. But 40 minutes goes quick, man.
It does go quick. Really does.
Yeah. All right, have
Yeah.
an amazing weekend. I appreciate
All right, you too,
brother.
dude.
All right,
Yeah, I
much
look
love.
forward to seeing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bye.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope you were inspired, educated, maybe even a little motivated to act in some sort of way to put the kids before the guns. Until next time, much love, everybody. Peace. We truly hope that you enjoyed today's podcast. And without further ado, here are today's outtakes. Enjoy. E-Money.
What up?
What's up, my brother?
Not much. Hanging out. Ready to go.
Yes, sir. I have these bacon and spinach breakfast.
Was it a big microphone in front of you?
Hey, you like that?
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
So if you give away my secret, I'll have to fucking kill
I
you.
will not say a word. That's a real picture of Jordan.
Right. We know, man. We know. We got those hints here and there. Every single time you come on, there's either another story or there's something.
My one buddy, we joke about name dropping. He probably knew me for like 8 months, and I never talked about anything that I did. And we were at a Padres game, and I told him a funny story. And he's like, "What? Like what? Like what do you do?" And then from then on, like every time I see him, there's some story, and we're always joking about. And he's like, "Wow, it was 3.5 minutes before you started name dropping." He goes, gives me shit like that.
That's
Like,
hilarious.
yeah, what can I tell you? So it looks like it's crooked.
It is a little crooked. Yeah. You got to, I think the side.
It's not. It doesn't look crooked when you look at it like this.
It does
It's
from
the
here,
camera.
though. Mm-hmm. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, it's because the way this thing's sitting. You do this.
All right, bet.
What does it say in this? What's your hat? Always film the police.
Well, the police are always filming us, so isn't it
Yeah.
fair that we always film them?
Yeah, right.
This march was interesting. I went last year.
Was it here?
Yeah, they had one here. I think they recently had one in San Francisco or something. So what's on the agenda this weekend? Wait, did you hear that they're canceling basketball? I'm so bummed, bro.
No, why?
They said there's only 3 coaches. They need 12 for the 3 leagues. And I'm like, can't you just tell everyone as a caveat in the initial email, we only got 3 coaches.
Yeah.
We need 12. If we don't get enough coaches, I'm gonna have to cancel, but at least try. So then he goes, we don't have refs. Can't the coaches ref? And the kids have waited 2 years after the pandemic to have like
Yeah.
this, like they're amped up, they're excited, they're ready.
Yeah.
Like clinics. So I was like, what about tournaments? Can you
Yeah.
do like 3 tournaments? So then it's only over a 2-day period. You can probably get refs as
Yeah.
opposed to over 8 weeks. So I don't know.
Yeah.
He's looking into it. I was so bummed, bro, because in the formative sort of years, I believe that you can coach your kid. Later, I don't think you should.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a bummer.
Yeah, like God. I mean, I so look forward to going from season to season when I was a kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like it wasn't even like even in Oak Park, Michigan, like what? Like they were so well organized.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, Chicago has one of the best park districts in the world.
Right?
And it's amazing how much open gyms and leagues and
Yeah.
because like the public schools don't have, when I was there, I don't think they do now, they don't have any sports. But right across the street from our school was a high school with a big park. So like my team in grade school was like amazing, like one of the top teams in the city. But it was a park team, and everybody on that team was from our school. So it was basically our school team.
Right.
So it wasn't like, oh, we get kids from all over different schools. Dawes Grammar School, Bogan Park. We just walked across the street, and that's where we played. So, but then you gotta have and they do have the park lifers, like guys, women, men. That's their job, and they work there, and they're there for 20 years, and the programs are solid, and everything's just kind of follows suit, and
Yeah,
that's how Arnie and I both grew up.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. How many white guys were there?
Well, in that park,
Chicago was different back then, right?
well, it was very segregated. So my grade school in that park was all white.
So you didn't cross over and go into their neighborhood, and they didn't come into yours just for the purpose of ball?
Well, for playing, but not like you didn't go play pickup over there. Not till I was older.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But the park district coach, Mr. Skoda, who was crazy, like we played all over the city, all comers, all tournaments, and like where Arnie was from, we played the University of Chicago tournament. That was probably 30, 40 teams in there. We were the only white team. So like we would go into, tough neighborhoods and play in tournaments and
Hell yeah.
and win a lot of them, Yeah, so that was good for me because it was just, otherwise you lived on your block, and I can tell you right now, there's probably 12 of those 15 guys still live within striking distance of that park,
Wow.
which is fine, no big deal, but yeah.
All right, Arnie's here.
Okay.
We're recording. Yep. That was my biggest fear when I first started. I was like, holy shit.
I know, right? Exactly. What's up, Arnie?
What's going on, guys?
All right, what's happening, Arnie? I'm gonna do a quick intro. This one's quicker than normal in the interest of time, and then we'll rock. I'll throw it to Dan to start, and then we'll just let it flow.
How long do you usually go for?
It's your world, so you let us know what your timeline is. Just jump in anytime and let us know. But anywhere from 30 to 60, it's just sort of
okay.
And then the rapid fires at the end. So that should be.
Yeah, I got to be out by 3:45 my time, so I got about 40. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. All right, here we go. Thanks again for joining us today, everyone. Feel free to send me an email to thesportsdeli@gmail.com. Also, check out my link tree. It's /Mike Hootner. Also like to thank a few people. 40 Tons brand is a socially conscious cannabis brand, and they're doing amazing things. Check them out. We'd also like to thank Moolah Kicks, the first ever female brand basketball shoe in the history of the world. We'd also like to encourage you, if you're having a hard day, and if you're feeling like you just don't want to live anymore, all you have to do is dial 988 from any phone, and there will be someone there 24/7, 365. Don't feel like you have to fight this battle alone. Don't forget to do your self-breast and self-testicular exams every month. It's really important, as early detection is the key. Remember, Black Lives Matter. Reach out to your local and state politicians for any individual or group that you feel are being marginalized. Stop the bullying. Stop the Asian hate. Let's end gun violence with common sense laws. Let's be allies for the LGBTQIA+ community. And I challenge those of you in the white space to be anti-racist, to be bridges and vessels, to help bridge the gaps between Black and white America. And remember, until next time, it takes a village, everyone. Much love.